Hi, I'm Anne Marie, and you are listening to Achieve Spiritual, Holistic, and Self Improvement Radio. We have a unique and exciting guest today. And I say exciting, I think we're probably from around the same era. And I think that also he has, how about that wonderful book cover he's got with a key that says, You're Conscious. And Leonard, why don't you tell me about you and what impassioned you to write your book?
Well, first, I'd like to thank you very much for the invitation to join you today. I've been looking forward to it. The book, Your Conscience, came about actually as a byproduct of COVID.
Awesome.
So there I was in quarantine with my wife at the American Meditation Institute, where we teach and that we founded in 1996, and contemplating, gosh, I have no students coming. How am I to be of service? What's the best way that I can use my energy at this time, being sequestered like this? And I looked at television, news reports, I read papers and magazines, spoke to people, and gosh, as we all know, an awful lot of people have experienced a tremendous amount of pain in the last couple of years. And I thought to myself, well, what can I do? Is there anything that I can do to ease that pain in any way? And what I thought was I would give people who were ready to hear it a gift that has been very, very, very important to me. And that is an understanding of the conscience. I'm sure that everybody has some kind of working understanding of what the conscience is, and probably the cultural spin has colored that understanding, and most of it is fairly incorrect and incomplete. Not much of the story about the conscience has been told. And so I said to myself, yes, that's what I'll do with my energy during quarantine. I'll write a book. I had no intention to write a book. I had no desire to write a book, but it was an act of service.
Amazing. Um, do you have any theories about, and yes, we all do have specific, well, when I say conscious, sometimes conscience also comes to me in what is it that your conscious is gravitating towards? Do you have any theories about why the division of the conscious mentality has been so radical in during the COVID?
Oh, I certainly do. I certainly do. And it's very understandable. Uh, and it's very commonsensical. And it's all about the
Commonsensical.
mind. It's all about the mind. It's all about the mind. And nobody really has taught us too much about the mind. When we were regardless of what level of school, the only portion of the mind that we were taught about and trained in was the conscious portion of the mind. And gosh, the conscious portion of the mind is just a small sliver of the mind. The vastness of the mind, the largest portion is the unconscious portion, where it's the storehouse of all of our habit patterns, everything that we deem essential to self-preservation, things like our memories and things like our imaginations. And so it's a situation where nobody has taught us beyond just memorizing things how the mind works. And the mind is so important because we can't speak a word and we can't take an action without first entertaining a thought. The mind moves first and the body follows. So
Interesting.
so
Interesting.
that speaks to the power of our thoughts. And yet every thought that comes into our awareness, which has tremendous power, is only a suggestion of what to give our attention to. But nobody has trained us how to discriminate between thoughts, between desires, emotions. Nobody has taught us that. Just memorize, and you'll pass a test, you'll get a degree, and you'll get a better, higher paying job. Well, that's helpful to live in the world, to have access to those types of resources. However, it does nothing for the conflict that's in our mind that is constantly projecting conflict outside the mind, like in the body, and the pain that the body feels, like the pain that we now experience interpersonally, whether it's on the field of action of politics or race, whatever it is. A lot of contention, and that is because inner conflict is the mother of all problems. If there's conflict in the mind, there has to be conflict outside the mind. If we can learn to reduce the conflict in the mind, we will also reduce the conflict outside.
Leonard, what is it that you think drives some people to worship a person more than they do? Oh gosh, how to say? We all have heroes, but what is it that drives some people to follow someone that has a political viewpoint? And I'm not trying to bring politics in this. I'm just wondering. I mean, I'm an ex-Obama fan, but I wasn't making him a god. And what is it that drove so many people, do you think, to be a worshiper or a die for you type kind of person for one person who represented their concept of what their concepts? Why does one person try to keep an open mind and another person, what is it in their conscious that makes them have to be able to worship a person more than common sense?
Well, that's the $64,000 question, so to speak, and it's an excellent question, and it really does need contemplation. I can give you my take on it, and that is that it all starts with the understanding, and it's a little bit difficult for people to accept, but human beings are animals. We always talk about that we're number one. Well, we might be the number one animal, but I'll tell you the truth. The crows in my backyard know that they're number one and we're not number one. So, everything is relative in that regard. My point is that when a human being does not use the conscience appropriately. Now, it's interesting because the conscience is the only function of the mind that makes a choice. People say, oh, this person never uses their conscience, or this is a matter of conscience. Both are wrong, you see, because the conscience is the only decision maker in the mind. The ego, the senses, and the unconscious mind, which drive a lot of the actions that human beings take as animals, they're only advisors. But when they make such a ruckus in the mind, and they're so insistent, as the ego, senses, and unconscious mind are, then the conscience loses its ability to reflect superconscious wisdom from the superconscious portion of the mind, same portion of the mind where Albert Einstein saw mathematical equations, same portion of the mind where Paul McCartney hears beautiful melodies. Doesn't mean that any of us is necessarily going to become a songwriter or a physicist if we use our superconscious wisdom. But the more we use it in thought, word, and deed, it means that it will positively affect every unique relationship that we have. But if we don't do that work, and we're not taught how to do that work, then human beings, which are essentially animals, rely exclusively on the ego, senses, and unconscious mind. And when that noise in the mind gets so loud from those three advisors, the only way the conscience can make a decision, because it will not be able to hear that very low signal coming from the superconscious portion of the mind. Instead, the conscience is relegated to merely rubber stamping the loudest voice, the egos, the senses, the unconscious mind. And what that means is I lose my sense of integrity. I am constantly relying on the ego, the senses, and the unconscious mind that have limited perspectives, that often endorse choices that bring pain, and I become so insecure, I create a tremendous sense of lack. And as an animal, I then go in search of a stallion who will make everything better.
Or in the case of crows, it is numbers.
Yes, right.
And loudness of their cause.
Yes.
And so when they are upset, crows will caw and scream, and they'll go after, and you can watch them attack anything that they feel is threatening or killing one of their babies. That's or right. or their number one. So,
and that's important because you're really talking about the fact that those animals are hardwired to the reptilian brain, which is all about the fear of annihilation and self-preservation.
Now we're getting into something, aren't we?
That's right. That's right. And so the ego speaks for the reptilian brain, because the ego doesn't want the form to die.
And so may I ask you, and maybe this is just something that we don't want to discuss, but so in the case of crows that are attacking anything that is not allowing them to be leader of the pack, then and being threatened by anything and everything that may, from the blue jays to the other birds that are also predator, but they also, it's a king of the predator. Then in the case of looking for the stallion, or looking for the lead crow, or looking for the lead, are we also talking about fear of annihilation, say that word, by race, color, religion, and fear that we will be annihilated because these other animals are in the backyard?
Well, the simple answer is yes. But we have to understand that from that limited animal perspective, change means death.
Yes.
Change means death and loss of control. But we already know from our limited perspective that change does not mean death. I remember that 5-year-old boy that is no more, but which grew into a 6-year-old boy and a 16-year-old boy and a 26-year-old young man and a 36-year man, et cetera, et cetera. So the culture has this cultural spin, and it's orchestrated by the animal consciousness that change means death. So we're
Change
very
means death.
suspicious. We're very suspicious of any change. And
Interesting.
but our experience is change does not mean death. Change means growth.
You know, one of the things I always admired about porpoise and killer whales. I remember seeing something about uh, the killer whales were going after the porpoise or the whales, and then all of a sudden, everybody just stopped, and the announcer saying, "Oh, this is very strange. What's going on? What's going on?" And the porpoise came back, and the whales, and it turns out they were having a council of some sort, and they all left that part of the ocean, not friends, but they evidently worked together to try to catch tuna or something together. It seems that perhaps sometimes those animals have more
Makes
ability than
sense?
we do. Yeah, yeah. Yeah,
Well,
because we are so lost in our superiority. I was just telling my husband the other day, one of the most confounding parts of the Bible that I get angered by was man has dominion over all animals and all things of earth. And look what we're doing. You know, we have in our haughtiness and our conscious superiority, um, we're killing both, you know, with our conscious superiority, our crow behavior.
so the culture has trained us and really hypnotized us to believe that the answer
Yes.
to everything that we're looking for is outside of us. And so we engage the senses to go out, to look, to smell, to taste, to hear, to touch, uh, in a desperate attempt to find happiness and security. And in the process, we dissipate a tremendous amount of our creative energy. And we're taught that the answers to everything lies outside of us. It's these experts out there. You know, we see these experts on television,
I
don't
was just
we?
going to say, where does media come into this?
And also radio and the press. Uh, but really, even though they're often wrong, these folks are never in doubt. They're never in doubt. And
Because
yet,
they're the stallion of who they
that's right.
represent.
That's correct. That's correct. But because we are hypnotized into constantly being addicted, really, the mind is addicted to looking outside, we have forsaken the best wisdom that is accessible to the human being, that is at the core of our own being. So the the key to successful living is what medicine calls homeostasis or balance. We're imbalanced. We're imbalanced. We're active in the world, controlling, obliterating, uh, enslaving to find happiness and security for myself. But I have forsaken this wisdom that is within me. So the key to successful living is to first and foremost, when you have to take an action or speak a word or even think a thought, counsel within. Ask the conscience in the quietude of the mind, asking the ego, senses, and unconscious mind just to be quiet for a moment. Listen to them when it's appropriate, but when you want to hear this superconscious wisdom, We need quietude. We need stillness in the mind. Then the conscience will be able to access this perfect wisdom from the center of consciousness. And that
That
can become our thoughts, our words, and our actions. That will always enable us to fulfill the purpose of our lives without pain.
Leonard, where does our each of those of us who are parents, and so much of us are only speaking in a recording of what our parents taught us. We're not processing ourselves. We're not processing our inner wisdom.
So whose
We're
life are we living?
Yeah, I don't know. Answer me on that one.
Well, I'm living my mother's life. I'm living my father's life. I'm living my
Yeah.
grandfather's life. I'm living those politicians that I adopted their faulty concepts. That's why I tell people that one of my most important gurus has been Elvis Presley.
Why
Oh,
is that?
I'm very serious. I'm very serious.
Why do you say that?
Well, I fell in love with Elvis when I was 10, and I've loved him every single day since then. And because
Oh,
I loved him, I gave him a tremendous amount of my attention. And because I gave so much attention to him, I observed many of the choices that he made in life, many of which conflicted with my own inner wisdom.
I was going to say he wasn't a perfect guy.
Well, for me, he was, because he taught me in many respects which burner on the stove is hot and which is not. He
Okay.
taught me what not to do. And very often our parents too teach us and model for us how not to act in
So
this.
the alcoholic parent does not
That's right.
necessarily have to be followed by the children being
That's right.
alcoholics, and they
That's
can
right.
learn from the parent. But
That's
so much of the prejudice and so much of the uh, you know the political aspects of what people believe is their stallion is I understand what you're saying. The inner processing, the quiet, the being able to shut off your mind and just allow the inner percolating process to transfer that conscious epiphany.
Mhm.
But you can't do it when you're so infiltrating yourself with the stallions who are supposedly who you chose, and both sides. I mean, I feel that way about both sides. I am married to a Republican conservative, but as a liberal, we do have learned that quiet and not pushing our belief systems, because it's the one thing we know after 23 years will destroy us.
So
Kind of
you
like
go ahead.
it's kind of like the porpoise and the whales.
Hmm.
You learn, you can attack, but then you stop, you come back, and you find a common denominator that you can build together. And I sure wish Congress and places could do that, but whatever.
Well, if we dearly want to experience happiness, if we really truly want freedom, if we want to be secure, then we will take on the work of a parent and recognize that it is our own mind that needs parenting. We have to become the parent to our ego, senses, and unconscious mind. Through the scientific process of experiment, we need to teach the ego, senses, and unconscious mind that all change does not mean death. Change can be very pleasant. And it's up to us as their parent to provide those opportunities for them to experience something pleasant where previously they were afraid of. And
Yeah.
that's the scientific method that this book that I wrote talks about and presents in very commonsensical, everyday language, to be able to experiment. It's 10 o'clock at night. There's a coffee commercial that comes on television, and the ego, senses, and unconscious mind already are lobbying in favor of going into the kitchen, getting coffee, getting maybe a second slice of apple pie that we had at dinner, you see. But the conscience, if we can ask the ego, senses, and unconscious mind to give us their opinion,
Absolutely.
and then ask them to sit down and then ask the conscience to, in that quietude, to reflect superconscious wisdom. And then the conscience can then share that wisdom. That 10 o'clock at night is not necessarily the appropriate time to have a cup of caffeinated coffee.
And a piece of pie.
And a piece of pie.
That's a very good.
And it's easy and it's simple.
It is.
And you know that as the parent, if you can gain the trust of the ego, senses, and unconscious mind, they will trust you more as their parent, and they will trust the conscience more as a force that is not going to take their control away.
Which takes discipline.
Well, what is discipline? Now, you see, now you brought up a very, very, very important point. Words in our language trigger us. Discipline is one of those words. Self-discipline is a word in our culture that is equated incorrectly with denial of something pleasurable. But no, discipline is not a denial of anything pleasant. What we are disciplining is the habits of the ego, senses, and unconscious mind that conflict with our superconscious wisdom, and only bring us pain. I'm talking about fear. I'm talking about anger. I'm talking about selfish desires that conflict with our inner wisdom. So how can I express the discipline? By letting go of those habits. Letting go of those habits to be able to support the superconscious wisdom reflected by the conscience, just for the sake of an experiment. It's not forever. I always carry my Doubting Thomas hat with me throughout the day, and I put it on when I'm doing an experiment because I'm a scientist. Mm-hmm. I want to know.
Are you a scientist?
I am a scientist. I am a yoga scientist.
Okay.
I am a yoga scientist.
And what is a yoga scientist?
It is a person who experiments with the truth. A person who is willing to experiment with the truth and parent the ego, senses, and unconscious mind to serve that truth in thought, word, and deed, and to self-discipline the personality when its suggestions conflict with the truth.
Okay, now that's a different definition of yoga than I'm used to. I like it. Yoga to me has always been disciplined positioning in the body, but you're making it
all about the mind. You see, that's all about the mind. The body is not going to reach a certain posture without first disciplining the mind.
Oh yeah, I'm sure. And taking the doubt away and taking all of the fear away.
Color commentary, right?
Yeah, right. So yeah, the commentary is
relentless.
It's
because the ego, senses, and unconscious mind have no power to make the decision. So they're constantly lobbying. They're pushy, they're loud, they're insistent.
Oh, their commentary just sucks. I would say that,
But they come by it honestly. They
you
come
know,
by it honestly.
Leonard, what really confused me during the time of, oh gosh, I hate talking politics, but I saw, I have a lot of spiritual friends, even in Iowa. And, but it is also very conservative country.
Sure.
And I was amazed to find how many spiritualists had jumped on board of the stallion that was the loudest rather than the wisest. But they saw loud as wise. The squeaky wheel that got the grease was the wise. And these are people who go out of their way to try to be kind and compassionate and caring with their clients. And yet I could not, I was just, I was maybe a little devastated, but I was amazed to see how many had not gone into their conscious to process inwardly and percolate on those, on
Well,
those.
they come by it honestly because nobody has trained them.
And yet,
Nobody.
yeah,
Nobody has trained them.
and yet these were disciplined.
Well, that has nothing to do with it.
Yeah, there you go. Disciplined word.
If there's anarchy in the mind,
Anarchy in the mind. Tell me about anarchy in the mind.
well, the ego senses an unconscious mind are anarchists. You see.
So can a even a spiritualist who seems to be somebody that is of common sense and wisdom and love and understanding still have an anarchist that can gravitate them towards stallions of?
Well, what would Jesus say to that? What would Jesus say?
I don't
Jesus,
know.
well,
What would
Jesus
he
would
say?
Don't give too much attention to the appearance, you see, but you shall know them by their fruits, he said. You shall know them by their fruits, by their actions.
But here's the confusing part, Leonard, is that everybody thinks their fruits are better. I mean, everybody thinks that their garden has been tended the best. And that for me is the confusing part.
Well, so how's that working for them?
Well, I don't know, but I think that a lot
Well,
has been
you
proven.
you can see how it's working for them. They're in a tremendous amount of pain. There's a tremendous amount of fear. There's a tremendous amount of anger. Is that happiness? Is that security? I think not.
No.
I think not. People are in a tremendous amount of pain. A tremendous amount of
Why
pain.
do you think that people are in such pain?
Because they're not whole. They're not whole. They don't know who they are. They don't know from where they have come. They don't know why they are here. They don't know really what's to be done or where they will go when the body is no more.
And then we go back to fear of death.
It's all about the fear of death. It's all about the fear of death. It's all about the fear of death. But if you come to know,
you need to write another book, Leonard, called Fear of Death. Because the death is in so many ways.
Every fear must be examined. President Roosevelt was correct. The only fear we have to fear is fear itself. You see, but fear always takes one of two forms. One of two forms. Either I'm afraid I might lose what I have, which a lot of people fear losing what they have, or I'm afraid of not getting what I want. And a lot of people, that's
of change.
Right. Yeah, you see. And so
will I die if I have change?
That's right.
Will I die if I accept change?
That's right. That's right. So that's all animal consciousness. It's all animal conscious. It's all reptilian. It's all reptilian. And the reptilian is loud and pushy. Know anybody?
Is it? Is the reptilian loud and pushy?
Well, the spokespeople for the reptilian brain, the reptilian brain cannot speak, but the ego can speak, the senses can speak, and the unconscious mind can speak.
So where does
And
the subconscious come in?
the unconscious is the subconscious.
Okay, so I'm going to ask you to, we've used a lot of terms here and technical terms. I would like you to just give a easy to understand description of conscious, what the
Unconscious. The four functions
unconscious,
of the mind.
yeah,
How about the four functions? The four
yes,
functions of the mind.
yes, please, and
Okay.
say them in an easy to understand way.
Okay. Okay. So the four functions of the mind are what creates actions for us that always brings about consequences that can lead us in one direction or another. That's known in yoga science as the law of karma. Thoughts lead to action, action leads to consequences. Okay. Now, Newton turned that into the third law of motion. For every action, there's an equal reaction. And so we have to understand that the mind moves first, the body follows. I can't raise my hand without first entertaining a thought. So the mind is moving first. The body only follows. That's very powerful. And what are the four functions of the mind that motivate the action? First of all is the ego, as I mentioned, hardwired to the reptilian brain. The ego is afraid of annihilation, always looking for that which is pleasant, and has an allergic reaction to that which is unpleasant. So the ego always insinuates itself into every decision that is taken, and cuts it in half and says, this is pleasant, I like this, I consider this good, let's reprise it. But this over here, this is unpleasant, I dislike it, I think this is bad, let's eliminate it. So it's all black and white. It's all black and white. Likes and dislikes. And that becomes strangulating in the mind, because what happens is human beings become addicted to things we like and things we don't like. But things we like aren't necessarily good for us. And things we dislike aren't always bad for us. So
Can I add something here, Leonard?
Sure.
I don't mean to interrupt you. Why does America so much into what we want to like, where some countries believe that suffering and being denied are things of the things that they consider to be necessary to almost like, so that they can be of service or be of godliness or whatever? Why is America so much about having to like? Are we worse than everybody else, or what is that? I
Well,
wonder.
if you take a look at the establishment of our nation and all these people who came here, they came here
because they didn't like.
They didn't like, and they wanted to control whatever was controllable.
So we're ancestors of people who followed what they liked and didn't, and were repelled by what they didn't like. So they gravitated towards pleasure and like. Okay, got it.
That's right.
That's where we got this.
And aversion and elimination from the dislike. You get rid of it. You obliterate it.
Let's go to America.
That's right. That's right. We'll go to America.
All right. So go on. I'm sorry. I don't mean to interrupt.
That's the ego. And it only has a limited perspective. It doesn't mean that the ego is altogether wrong. You and I right now need a healthy ego to have this conversation and make sense to people who are listening, as well as to ourselves. We need a healthy ego to drive an automobile or a truck. So the ego is not always wrong, you see. But how do we know? It's so insistent. It never quits. So the ego is very, very powerful. Then the senses. The senses take our creative energy. The mind extrudes our creative energy through the eyes and the nostrils and the mouth and the ears and the hands and the feet to go out into the material world to look and smell and taste and hear and touch in an attempt to find happiness and security. The challenge for us is that the senses are only interested in pleasure. So that's what they're looking for. They're looking for pleasure. And very often, the pleasure is just the front of what is being offered. The back is the pain. And because
we see this in marketing all the time.
Absolutely.
Marketing always gives you a glowing, how many things have I purchased because of all the wonderful things that they've showed, only to find a piece of crap.
That's right.
It was a piece of crap. That's all it was with
That's
great
right.
marketing.
Just sell the sizzle. Just sell the sizzle. That's right. Well, that's us. That's the senses. And what happens? The senses become so addicted to the objects of sense that are pleasant that the senses waste a tremendous amount of our creative energy that could go into resolving the seemingly unresolvable in our world. You see, if we had that creative energy back after chasing all these infinite number of rainbows,
we're still looking for the stallion.
We're still looking for the stallion because we believe that the answer lies outside. It lies outside, which it does not. So that's the senses. And they too only have a limited perspective. And they're often wrong, but they're never in doubt. So you have the ego, you have the senses, and you have the unconscious mind, which is the repository for all of these habits created by the ego and the senses.
The unconscious mind.
Unconscious.
Which is the same as subconscious.
Yes. This is the repository for everything that we deem essential to self-preservation. It's our memories. It's our imagination. Yeah. So.
But what? So where does that fit into it? I mean, it's the toy box where it all goes in.
That's right.
But what then? So does that toy box of all of those experiences and thoughts then become that more important than anything else?
Well, let me put it to you this way. Cellular biologist Bruce Lipton says that unconscious forces are 98% more powerful than good intention. That becomes our software. The unconscious is our software package. And
the toy box is our software.
That's right.
Oh my gosh. Right.
And when we are just skimming the surface level of consciousness, not appropriately taught how to use our conscience to dive deeply to that super conscious wisdom, then we're on autopilot. And when we're on autopilot, the programming is just running automatically. And I become a marionette
of this toy box.
That's
of
right.
all of the stuff that's
of
inside
my software package.
Yeah, of your software package.
So that software package needs an update.
But that would be change.
That's right.
And we might die if we have change.
That's right. So we only have one option, and that is to love and parent our ego, senses, and unconscious mind, to invite them to share their perspective, then ask them to be quiet, and then call on the conscience, which is the only function of the mind that can discriminate, determine, judge, and decide. And once the mind is quiet, the conscience then can reflect superconscious wisdom to determine the thought to think, the word to speak, the action to take. Then it's my responsibility to parent the ego, senses, and unconscious mind in seemingly insignificant situations so that they're not going to be overwhelmed.
And so what I'm going to, in my limited understanding, I think I understand, but what I'm when I first asked you, where does parenting come in? The prophet says we are the bows and our children are the arrows, and we just have the ability to and send them off. So in other words, they're teaching us, parents are teaching children basically the logical, the strategy and the logics for how they sit at the table and make their mind listen to everything that's in that software. But what I guess what I'm saying is that puts parenting at an even more important level than I thought it was, because then parenting is really the common denominator for how that child is going to process their own common sense, their own toy box of experiences, and sit down and be quiet and shut up so the parent can talk and teach. So that makes the parent really just the main computer for the software of the child's future.
No, the parent is the programmer.
The programmer, right.
The
That's what I meant.
programmer. The
Yeah.
programmer. And it doesn't, and they don't even have to say a word, because from a prenatal to 6 years of age, the child does not have a mature conscience. So the child, when the child is born, they are aware, just like a TV camera.
Yeah, they're absorbing.
They are constantly absorbing. And what are the two most important objects that they observe?
Parents.
Mom and dad. Mom and dad. And they're watching.
Or grandpa and grandma or whoever.
Yes. But especially mom and dad, because they're
If
there
they have
all
one.
the time, all the
Yeah.
time.
Right.
And the baby, the child, is watching the facial expressions. In this situation, are they communicating fear and reservation, or joy and openness? And that becomes my software.
Wow. Interesting. Yeah, profound. I like that.
That's right. We're bound. That's right. Just like Gulliver, by these slender threads. These slender threads.
Very cool. Very interesting. So we've got 10 minutes left. Can you name the chapters of your book so that we can kind of see what the building blocks of your book are?
Well, I would prefer to do an experiment with you.
All right.
to exemplify this experimenting process, because it's all about experimenting and
Okay.
becoming the parent.
All right. Okay.
So let's just say, for the sake of argument, we just had a wonderful dinner. So the question comes up, are we going to brush our teeth? Okay. So in that kind of a situation, what I do as the parent is I call a family meeting. I call the ego, the senses, the unconscious mind, and the conscience to a meeting seated around the kitchen table. And I tell everybody, look, we just had a wonderful dinner. Are we going to brush the teeth? and I'd like to call on each of you individually. Ego, we'll call on you first. What is your opinion? And the ego will say something like, I'm against it. I vote no. Any change equals death and loss of control. So I'm opposed. Thank you very much. Now please sit down quietly.
Could I say what my ego would say? The meal just is going to make me fat, so I better go out and exercise.
Okay. Possibly. But what do the senses say? The senses also
I don't want to do it.
No, I don't want to do that.
I want to watch TV.
Want to watch TV, and I like a big bowl of ice cream.
Yeah, thank you very much. I'll brush my teeth later.
Maybe I won't.
Maybe I won't.
And the unconscious mind, which is the repository of all those habits from the ego and the senses, what does the unconscious say? The subconscious, what do they say? It says, well, I vote with the ego and the senses because that's my habit. We often vote in a block. It's a voting block.
So let me get this right. The conscious is the parent.
No.
I mean which is the parent?
Me, consciousness.
Consciousness is the parent. And which is the one that says, I'd rather watch TV? Senses, sight, and taste, and ice cream. And the unconscious is the one that is habits. So
the software.
Okay, so that's the toy box full of crap.
Well, not all.
Good and bad. And so it decides to go with habit.
Yes, with habit. It's the easiest way. Habit.
Yeah. So maybe habit is the parent, if the parent taught well to brush their teeth then.
Well, maybe, but not always. It depends.
Yeah.
It depends.
Depends on their habit.
Isolated. Yeah, that's right.
The habit of their thinking.
That's right.
And everyone's thinking is unique.
That's right.
Each child may process differently.
Yes. So now we've heard from the ego, the senses, and the unconscious mind. All oppose it. Then you listen to the conscience. And because the ego, senses, and unconscious mind are sitting quietly at the table now, the conscience can reflect superconscious wisdom from the superconscious portion of the mind. And the conscience will report something to the effect, look, we all know that this life that we're living, it's not a sprint, it's a marathon. And for a marathon, we need strong, healthy teeth, strong, healthy gums, strong, healthy immune system. And if we can just take a time out for 2 minutes, just 2 minutes, go brush the teeth, that will help us gain stronger teeth, stronger gums, and a stronger immune system. Then it's my job as the parent, for the sake of the experiment, is to encourage and discipline the ego, senses, and unconscious mind and explain to them, this is just an experiment. It's not forever. If this doesn't work out and you don't like it, we'll do something else. But let's just experiment with it. And going in as a smart parent, I know that it's going to be attractive. So we go in, we brush the teeth, we come back, and then we have another meeting. I ask the ego, senses, and unconscious mind, what did you experience having brushed the teeth?
I like the fact that you said it's going to be attractive.
Yes, it has to be attractive.
Because I think that's why people fight the relevance of COVID.
Mm-hmm.
Polio caused crippledness. The plague caused all kinds of warts on the face. But COVID doesn't cause crotch rot, doesn't cause unsightly welts on your face, and it doesn't cause crippleness. So you die, maybe. But if it's not going to hurt me and it's not going to make me look unattractive and it's not going to cause me to be crippled or, I'm just going to go for it. I mean, why not? I feel like a lot of what you just said is based on also what's in it for me with the COVID shots and with the and you're going to tell me now you don't have a COVID shot, right? You're going to tell me you're against them, which is okay. But I mean, I think a lot of this is also why people do not consider the COVID to be important to them. And I think it's simply because at the dinner table, when they process it, I'm young, I'm going to live, therefore I have no problem with just seeing what happens. I won't get crotch rot, I won't get unsightly blemishes, and I won't.
Which function of the mind is authoring those thoughts?
Okay, thank you, teacher. That would be okay, what it was. Well, that would be the processing part, wouldn't it? Or
Well,
the
partially, mostly ego. I don't
okay,
want to,
ego.
because
Yeah, yeah.
any change is death.
All right. Yeah, that's right.
Who knows what's going to happen with this vaccine? Oh my gosh, it could be terrible. I hear many people saying, you see, and you don't even have to say what it is. I hear many people saying that it's no good. Mm-hmm. And so what does that engender? Fear.
But the fear
I'm
of
not going
death.
to tell you. Of course, it's the fear of death. Of
But
course, it's the fear. All fear is the fear of death.
But it's also, I think, the ego saying, I've processed this. There's nothing going to happen with my face. There's nothing going to happen
It's saying
with
it is
birthing.
not the reality.
No, but you know what I'm saying is that they're processing of elimination. This isn't going to happen. This isn't going to happen, and this isn't going to happen.
They don't know that.
I know.
Don't know that. They don't know that. They don't.
But I might die, but maybe I might live. So that case of death doesn't seem to be. Do you think, Leonard?
I believe that the people, most people are so fearful of death. It's all around us. It's reinforced and it's hypnotized by the whole culture. That's why we segregate death. We don't even want to look at it.